Hello friends, welcome. I am Mohammad Tarique, and in this class I'm going to discuss how to prepare for civil services. Whether you are appearing in 2022, 2023 or 2024, this lecture is going to help all such students who are serious candidates anywhere in India with any subjects as their optional. The topic which I am going to tell you is directly related to the entire scheme of exam, whether it is the prelims exam, whether it is main exam, or it is your personality test or interview. Why some candidates crack this exam in the very first attempt, at least 12 to 13%, and why some in second and third attempt, some has to struggle a little more, maybe fourth and fifth attempt, and in case of OBC and SC and ST candidates, even sixth and seventh attempt I have seen. Now, if you wish to crack this exam as early as possible, in the very first attempt, for instance, at the very young age, 21, 22, 23, as many my students have cracked this exam very successfully in the last 10 years. And those students I have seen very closely, and they have understood the very nature of this exam. So based on that, the first thing which you should keep in your mind that needed in this exam is how much you are focused. That means the next 24 months in your life is going to be the most important phase of your life, at least in the study time, in the phases of your studies. When I say focus, I mean that you have to see the syllabus and the question pattern of last 5 years, at least the main exam, and last 7-8 years of prelims before you start any coaching or any kind of assistance or guidance. Like we are here to provide you all kind of assistance in the next few months. If you do not have focus, there is no point that you can understand syllabus and question paper. So these are the two very important points after focus, that how well you have understood the syllabus. It is available on all websites, and of course UPSC publish it with its notification as it came recently. The question pattern which I say, it is related to your prelims as well as main of both optional and general studies. You do not have to only see the question, you have to literally internalize every segment very carefully with the help of some seniors and some teachers. Once you are done with this, and I presume that you are going to get some coaching and guidance from us, which of course would reduce your labor. What in your own capacity you would do in 2 years, in a good coaching you can do it in 6 months. What you can do in 3 to 4 years, in a good coaching they can do it in 8 to 12 months. That's the great advantage of good coaching and guidance of some experienced faculty subject wise. Now, in your stages of preparation, make sure that you should have a very good strategies. You can name it plan, strategy, mantra. In market we have hundreds of such name, but I call it strategies, in which you should have at least 18 to 22 months in hand before you appear first time in this exam. And I personally believe, of course, different teachers have their own views, different institutions have their own views. But since I am teaching since last 26, 27 years exclusively for civil services in various private coaching institutions and government institutions in Delhi and in a central university, with all my experience, I can tell that minimum time which this exam would take would 18 months to 22, maybe 24 months. But if you're thinking that you can do it in 12 months, I at least am not going to agree on this. Reason, you have one full optional paper, whichever you are going to opt, whether history or geography, eco or science, any science paper or engineering paper or anthro or public ad, and that itself is of a graduation level, and that itself would take 6 to 7 months thoroughly. Then, as you know, in general studies, paper 1 to 4, there are a lot of segments in objective and subjective type. CSAT, of course, is not as tough as others, but it takes some time. Essay itself is nowadays is very reflective, literary, and some people call philosophical. So each of these would require good amount of time, good amount of revision, good amount of writing practices, both objective and subjective type. That is why you tell yourself, tell your parents that I am going to write in this exam after 22, 24 months, and I will give minimum 2, maximum 3 attempts. I would say do not take too much attempts in your mind, because life is precious. There are a lot of other services in India, private and government, which you can try. But there is no point that after 3 years you are continuously in this service and preparing and then coming back to the square. So 2 years, max 3 years. But not without preparing 18 to 22 months in a go. In this strategy, make sure that your list of books, your list of study material, your list of magazines, your list of newspapers, your list of some YouTubes, your list of some websites are very carefully chosen. And unless it is must, do not read an article, do not watch a video, do not see any news item which comes in newspaper. Yes, sometime for entertainment we can do that, and I will tell you that entertainment part also somewhat later. But make sure that just because somebody told you, or your roommate, or some of your friend, and you started reading, and after few days you realize it was of no use and it was not worth, then you would develop a habit of reading a wrong kind of materials just because somebody has suggested. Sometime even the toppers who give interview every year after passing, you would find give different sources, because each candidate has their own choices of studies. And do not forget that many such toppers, when they would give interview, they would only tell certain part of their preparation, maybe the last part, maybe the best part, but not the entire 2 year of their studies and strategies. That is why only after reading that he suggested or she suggested you read this, and you started reading without knowing, maybe he also read only 2 chapters of that and you are reading 10 chapters of that book. So that means that 8 chapters which you read was of no use. This is what the point you have to understand, that make sure that the list of books and study materials are chosen very carefully. Like I will take history classes and I will tell each segment of history, from modern history to ancient to medieval to art and culture and world history, from where to get these materials apart from my classes. And you would find that we believe in limited number of books, limited number of study materials and magazines, because it is a competitive exam. Here, the very purpose of certain questions are not only to check your knowledge. Of course, this is going to be checked at every stage of your exam, pre to main to interview. But also very important part is to read your mind. UPSC is interested in knowing how your mind functions. Is it activated or not? As you must have seen in the movie Three Idiot, the dean says to those 3 actors, Amir Khan and his friends, that these are 3 unused mind. He didn't say that they don't have mind. He said unused mind. What does it mean? That many of us have, of course, the same mind. How much our mind is activated, how much our mind is functioning. Because unfortunately, the way in our schools, colleges, and universities we got training, we are studying in a very stereotype ways. There is a set question, set answer, set question, set answer. Any subject you take it. But in civil services exam, the questions itself is very dynamic. It may be taken from text, history or geography, economy and science and tech, polity and governance, but the questions would be always, as far as main and interview is concerned, based on this simple principle that they would check your knowledge of the text, they would check the recent development in that subject, and they would check your views, your understanding on that particular topic. For instance, just giving an example, recently there is a controversy in Karnataka regarding hijab. Now, forget the political part, just take it in exam, what kind of questions from prelims to interview they can ask, and am I ready? So, in the Constitution of India, Article 14, Article 19, Article 25, Article 25 and 21, each one are going to be used in the courts, High Court of Karnataka or Supreme Court in the coming days and weeks. You have to be watchful about the judgment of those courts, because the court is going to interpret these laws as these are all fundamental rights. And sometimes one fundamental rights clashes with another one, like 14 may clash with 25. And of course, there is a precedent, there is a ruling also, that in case of the clash, the early part, that is 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, would prevail over the later part, that is 24, 25, 28, etc. So you have to wait till the judgment comes, but make sure before you go to exam, UPSC, you have your own view, your own understanding, your own reason why you agree with the judgment or not, why you agree with the decision of the government, why you agree with the decision of the community in question. That is going to claim that, okay, this boy, this girl has an independent thinking and he or she is a good material for civil service. Because every bureaucrat at the end of the day has to take a decision, and the decision must be based on constitution, based on reason, based on larger interest of the public which he or she is serving. This question is a way to find out your mind is ready for such kind of important post or not. If you are on track and lacking some experience, they are ready to take you. They would give that experience and training in Mussoorie, in Hyderabad, in Baroda, in Ghaziabad, in Delhi, various training centers. But if your mind is not activated right now or in the next 12 to 18 months, then they would not take risk on you, whether evaluating your answer or giving marks during interview. Very few students have understood during the preparation that what is the demand of UPSC. What UPSC is looking through this exam, as far as the prelim exam is concerned, which was introduced somewhere in say 1979, it actually is a rejection round more rather than selection. And the reason why prelims was introduced, I was told by one of the former chairman of UPSC himself, who died, who was the governor of Bengal and Haryana, Mr. S.R. Kedwai. And he was chairman of UPSC when this was introduced. And what he said in a lecture, and I was a student at that time, when he told that since number of applicants were very high by 1977, 78, almost 80,000, and they were writing all main So it was very difficult for UPSC to evaluate answer copies of so large number. Many of them may not be very serious also. So they started a screening so that non-serious candidates are excluded and they check copy only of serious candidates. So what happens that now 12 to 14,000 depending upon the seats, people are called to write main exam. So initially the questions which they asked from say 1979 to 89 first 10 year was of like GK, general knowledge type. But over a period of time, this paper itself became very challenging, I would say, not difficult, because now it has become GS, general studies. Now here you have history and geography, eco and science, tech, polity and governance, current affairs, and anything and everything which comes under the sun, it is said, could be asked in general studies, objective and subjective type. And not only the area which they have widened, but the way they are asking is also changing from years to years. For instance, now they are asking a question in which you have more than one answers, and they could be both correct, both wrong, multiple answers, 1, 2, 3, all can be correct, all can be wrong. That means when you study any part of GS, you have to study with detail. You cannot study superficially. There is a saying, God lies in detail. Somebody has changed it also, devil lies in details. But here I would say that you believe in the first statement, God lies in details, means that when you study history, ancient, medieval, modern, do not read superficially. Read it, that book or that material or that class which we will suggest you, but make sure when you read that, read it as much detail as possible. For instance, when you're talking about, say, Mahatma Gandhi's various movement, so right from South Africa days till his death, you have to track all the issues which Gandhi dealt, all the movements with which Gandhi was associated, all the books and magazines which Gandhi wrote or edited, because they are asking questions in both objective and subjective type. So you don't have to necessarily read autobiography of Gandhi, My Experiment with Truth. If you read it's well and good, but as far as civil service exam is concerned, you have to be selective also at least in the next 18 months. So when you are reading that part of general studies, say if you are studying economy, now suppose you are dealing banking. So make sure right from the origin of banks in the world and in India, how the Sahukars and Mahajans in the medieval time would work, how the modern banking system evolved, what is the role of RBI, what is the role of SBI, what is the difference between the public banks and the private commercial banks, cooperative banks, what are the issues of banks right now, like what is NPAs, why many banks have been merged, which banks were merged into which bank, there's a list of all that. What is CRR, which you often hear, what happens when suddenly interest rate is reduced or increased as far as in the market. This is how UPSC is famous for. And of course, any person who is teaching you this topic of economy, he or she would tell you every aspect of banking. This is what I said. You can't study in superficial way. But when you study in the text, get it through newspapers, whether the Hindu or the Indian Express. Of course, these are the two best newspaper for any civil service aspirants. And even if you are preparing in Hindi, I would suggest कि एक अखबार आप अंग्रेजी का ज़रूर पढ़ें डेली, और दिल्ली से जो निकलता हो, क्योंकि दिल्ली का जो अखबार होता है उसकी खूबी ये होती है कि इट इज़ हैविंग एन ऑल इंडिया पर्सपेक्टिव एंड लेस रीजनल न्यूज़, क्योंकि दिल्ली छोटा सा स्टेट है और पूरी तरह स्टेट भी नहीं है. बाकी जो स्टेट के अखबार होते हैं दे कवर अ लॉट ऑफ रीजनल न्यूज़ and you may waste a lot of time because that may not be needed. So one national newspaper, whether your medium is English or Hindi or any regional language. So you, after text, get it through newspaper, then come again through some of the study materials. And of course, after reading these materials, you make sure that you revise whatever you have studied. Now, in your menu of study, make sure revision is an essential part. Without this, you're going to struggle at every stage. Of course, in the classes, we will tell the method, some of the tips, how to revise, what should be the frequency. For instance, you can keep only, say, whole Sunday for revision. So 1 week, 1 day, all 6 days studying, 1 day only revision. Suppose last 2 days of the month, 29, 30 or 31, only for revision. So you got revision in two methods. One, 4 Sundays or sometimes 5 Sundays, and 1, 29 to 30, 5 plus 2, 7 days. Sometime it may overlap, but minimum you would get 6 days in a month for revision of what you read in the month, right? Then of course, as the exam comes nearer, last 1 month, for instance, last 30 days or 35 days before prelims, we suggest don't read anything new, including newspaper. Reason? The paper most likely had already been prepared and must be in machine for publication. Reason is this, that UPSC is a big organization all over India. They have to send the physical copy. And since I know the entire process, how the papers are made and published, and how much time it consumes. So what I would ideally suggest, that if your exam, say on 5th June, after 10th of May, stop reading newspaper, because that 2 hours which you would save, you can devote in some other part, and where that is what you have to understand. Series of tests you have to practice at your own level through the institutions in a group of 100 students, 200 students, or online. All together are sitting, and you also with a clock, because then your mind would be working for the exam. I call test should be of two types. One in cricket language, net practice, and one is match practice. Now, you must have seen some cricketers. In a net, they practice bowling and batting, few hours in the morning or evening. And then they also practice before an international match, before a test match or World Cup, lot of local match with good player of the city and the state, with all the rules and regulations in the stadium, with certain audience, umpire, so that psychologically the players are ready for the big game. This is the reason why you must have noticed that some players perform better, those who have gone through the mills of these practices. Now, big exam like prelims days or main exam or interview is not only an exam of your knowledge, but also an exam of your character, which means how much pressure you can handle on that day. And believe me, I have seen many students on that particular day of 2 hours of GS, he or she did better than his normal, and he or she is in, or he or she did poorly in that 2 hours and they are out. Now, 4 or 5 questions, sometime 1 or 2 questions, sometime even not single wrong question, not extra right question, but one single decision that I am not going to touch this question. I am going to leave after 85 questions. Suppose I'm not going to touch the 86th question, I'm leaving 15 questions. That decision itself can be so crucial that it can make in or out. I remember once the cutoff for general candidate in prelims was 105.5. Few years back, that you can check it. One of my candidate told when the marks came that he got 105. Now imagine, with 0.5 marks, he missed. On that day, what he had to do, just one thing, that one question which he attempted wrong, had he not attempted, he would have been in, because that wrong deducted his mark from his right. So how it happens? It happens because of the pressure on that hours. Now, if you want to remain cool in exam hall, practice as much as net, practice as much as match before you go to UPSC exam hall. So for you, it would be like just another day, because you have already seen maybe say 50 net practice, 100 net practice and 50 match practice, or at least 40 match practice with 100 and 200 people online or offline with you. That is definitely going to help a lot. This I'm telling you all from the experiences of my students who have both passed and failed, like this boy. Of course, next year he passed and he got some IRS, I suppose. So this is what I'm saying, that how this point of test series, and when I talk about test series, I'm not talking only of prelims, I'm talking of main also. And of course, in interview, we call it mock interviews. So before he or she goes to UPSC, we would help you in few mocks so that you go mentally prepared and ready for those possible questions in interview also. Of course, that part we will be discussing as we progress. Now, in civil services, history, as we all know, and culture is very important topic for many reasons. One is that in your GS paper 1, it is asked directly. In certain parts of GS 2 related to constitutional history, it is going to be asked. In paper 4, you would get people like Buddha and Gandhi and Vivekananda and a lot of other philosophers of India or even world through history. Then, if you look at essay, you would find at least 1 or 2 questions directly coming from essay, or if you coming in essay, or if you are good in history and historical subjects, you can understand the depth of the essay. You can understand the varieties of that essay. And of course, history would help you to write a matured essay. Do not forget that the range of marks in essay we are getting is between 100 to 160. And of course, if you get 140 plus, you have a better chance to get called for interview. And that can be like, maker or breaker of your selection. So in my personal opinion, essay, optional, and interview, optional paper, and interview, these are the 3 part of the exam which is going to be most decisive in terms of selection, in terms of ranking or proper service. Of course, optional papers itself is around 25% weightage. Then essay itself around 12.34%, that is 250 marks out of 2025 marks. Interview is also around 14 to 15% weightage. So you have to give weightage according to the marks allocated by UPSC to each paper. And that is what strategy comes, that if 12% to 13% weightage is essay, so in your entire schedule of year, make sure you give that percentage of time for essay preparation. What I have noticed, a good number of students are giving very limited time to 2 parts of their exam, A, essay, and B, interview. 14 to 15% of Entire marking is on interview. How can you take it lightly? It is not 2%, it is not 3%, right? So what most students do a mistake that they start preparing on interview after the result of main. And after the result of main, suppose your interview on the very first day or first week, so you would get hardly 20 days. And suppose your interview on last day, so you would get around 2 months or plus minus 10 more days. Now, suppose I take, you're very lucky that you got last week. So it's still 2 months. In 2 months, you cannot change your personality. That is for sure. Again, I have seen in mock interviews, luckily I have done, I would say now, thousands of mock interviews in various places in Delhi and outside Delhi, with luckily some former members of UPSC, including a former chairperson, including some senior bureaucrats of secretary level, DGP level, and ambassadors, and of course academicians. Many of my students were toppers in the rank of top 10 to top 20 to top 30 to top 40 to top 50. I have all those students luckily. What I have noticed, and many of my students got 220, 215, 206, 205, 204, 200 plus, plenty. 180 plus, 190 plus, and also a student who got 110, 120, 130. They're also my student, right? So I know the difference between a student who got 110, 130 and a student who got 180 plus, 190 plus. In the mock itself, me and one my senior would give a marking. And when the marks was allocated finally by UPSC, we would first see, and you would be surprised that in 90% cases, our tally was as close as UPSC. Of course, my senior colleague was better than me as far as guessing the mark. Like he said 202 and I said 195 and the candidate got 201. That I can tell one candidate. He is an IPS now in Maharashtra cadre. Suppose I told about a candidate 210 and he said 215 and that candidate got 215. Exactly. So this is what I said. I was very close. He was like giving marks himself in UPSC, but I know he was not in UPSC that year. So how we learn it? We learn it in that 30 minutes of interview. We know that the scale of a student, when we have to, measure where he or she ranks, that is based on her or his overall personality. And that is what you have to be careful. Knowledge is a part, but it is not the major part of interview. It's your etiquette in interview, the way you answer and the way you think. Not only what you answered, but how you came to that conclusion becomes very important in interview. And that would take some time. Even the pauses which you take, even the frequency at which you speak, even the pitch of your voice, even the manner in which you disagree becomes very important in exam. And very interestingly, many a time, even if you don't know the answers of question number 1 and 2, 4 and 5, 6 and 7, you would still get very good marks. And a student who gave 10 out of 10 answer and still can get less mark. So many students are clueless after interview. यार मेरा इंटरव्यू तो बड़ा अच्छा हुआ था, पता नहीं मार्क्स क्यों खराब आया. On the other hand, the student said, I was little not sure about one particular question or two question and still he was selected. We know that reason because it is not only knowledge, as I told, it is a personality. What are those qualities which UPSC is looking? We will definitely tell you in our classes. So history is going, as I told, to help you in GS 1, 2, 4, essay, and in interview. No interview in UPSC would be complete without discussions on modern India. And modern India, particularly in three centuries, 18th, 19th, and 20th century. So they would particularly focus on 20th century, before independence, after independence. Lot of issues which emerged in modern history. Nationalism is still big issue in India. You have parliamentary democracy, you have federal structure, what some people call, you have independence of judiciary, we have caste and class, we have minorities issue, women issue, we have workers issue, peasant issue, tribal issue. All these issues were part of modern Indian histories. So if you're good in that, you can continue in post-independent till the current period. And in UPSC, when you are writing main exam, when you are giving interview, your overall knowledge would come to play an important role in the structure of your sentences, because don't forget, the questions which they are going to design does not exist in market right now. It is in the minds of few people who are going to frame questions. Topics are known to all of us. Suppose in environment they are going to ask. So obviously Glasgow conference, Paris conference, and various other international commitments, India's commitment, United Nations goal, that we all know these are the topic. But how the questions would be framed on that day in exam, main or interview, we don't know. But if you're trained to think independently, think creatively, think on the spot, or what we call think on your own feet. So you can, in 2 minutes, think, 7-8 minutes, write in the exam. In interview, you can recollect, think in 10 seconds, and then you can speak in 1 to 2 minutes in interview. That is only possible when you have done the homework of revision, of reading right material right from the beginning, listening right lecture on each topic, because if your concept is not clear and you just have factual knowledge bombarded by the teacher through PPTs, through study material, because unfortunately in these days, we have plenty of materials in the market. And if you go to Rajendra Nagar, Mukherjee Nagar, Anna Nagar, Ashok Nagar, that is in Chennai and Hyderabad, the first two in Delhi, then you would notice that hundreds of printed materials, and students are completely confused where to start and where to end. And as I told, we believe that in this exam, you have limited resources to study, and our formula is this, that suppose in history, there are 10 books, we suggest donate 9, read 1, but read this one 10 times. Just giving an example, don't take it literally, कि एक ही किताब पढ़नी, right? Means as limited book as possible, but as many time as possible, so that every chapter and within chapter, every facts and figures and data and concept is memorized, but understood, and when it is needed, you can reproduce. And it is very, very important part that how much you can reproduce when you are sitting for writing, when you are appearing in objective type, and how much you can reproduce in an interview, because the time lag between the question asked and the answer which you have to give would be very less in interview. It cannot be 1 minute. It cannot be even 20 seconds. It has to be 5 to 10 seconds at the best. And sometimes some students do ask, sir, may I think? They would allow you. But how much time? Not 40 seconds, not 50 seconds, because just watch your clock and see when I say 30 seconds how long it is, and when 5 people are sitting and all are silent for 30 seconds, that 30 seconds looks 3 minutes. Okay, that is called theory of relativity. So this is the point you have to understand. You cannot think beyond 10 seconds. Similarly, in the main exam, for each question, you would get around 8 to 9 minutes. which means you cannot think between more than 2 minutes. After all, you have to write it the next 7, 8 minutes. So how to recollect in that 2 minutes and that 10 seconds very quickly is possible because you have done it at your home, plenty of time of reproduction. And that is possible when you have revised the entire history syllabus, ancient, medieval, modern. Of course, in the classes, I will give you the entire notes that would be dictated as well, that would be explained. The idea with explanation is this, that you have a material in hand which is needed, but also on that material, if the question is asked slightly what is called twisted, you should have a skill to answer. Just giving an example, few example which was asked in the main exam. One example was that without Mahatma Gandhi, the freedom struggle of India could have been somewhat different. Comment. That was a question you have to write in 250 words. Now, this question, I'm sure, did not exist in the market before this question was asked by UPSC. After that, of course, every coaching institution started publishing the answer of that question. But in our classes, we always discuss the role of Mahatma Gandhi in freedom struggle and also the challenges which Indian leadership, including Gandhi, had to face, that the caste challenge, upper caste, lower caste, Hindu-Muslim issue, farmer versus zamindar, capitalist versus workers, orthodox versus modern, apart from British versus Indian. So what was happening before Mahatma Gandhi, that say the moderate Congress or the extremist Congress, the fight was like Indian versus British. But Gandhi realized that there are inner fight also in India, and unless we unite and bring them at a common what is called minimum program, then our entire attention would be diverted towards those internal issues and we can never win against British. So that is why he would talk about Hindu-Muslim unity. He would talk about bringing Dalit into the mainstream politics, women into mainstream politics, farmer into mainstream politics, workers into mainstream politics. But he also knew that capitalists and industrialists were also needed. After all, who would fund those, say, campaigns and some organization and some rallies, etc. So G.D. Birla was with him, Jamnalal Bajaj was with him. Lot of Congress leaders were zamindars, they were nationalists. They didn't want to leave their zamindari. Gandhi knew that. So Gandhi would not talk the way Lenin and Karl Marx and Mao Zedong would talk about class struggle. Gandhi also knew that a lot of upper caste people are in Congress. They believe in caste hierarchy. But Dalit leaders like Ambedkar wanted caste annihilation. So Gandhi would not talk caste annihilation as Ambedkar did. Gandhi would not talk about a Muslim majority province as Jinnah demanded. So he was trying to bridge the gaps between the classes, among the caste and the gender, and to a great extent he succeeded. Of course, he had enemies also. Within upper caste, he had enemies. Within lower caste, he had enemies. Within Hindus, he had enemies. Within Muslims, he had enemies. Many farmers rejected him, like Swami Sahajanand Saraswati rejected him. Many zamindars later on became, anti-Gandhi. So that is very interesting. And ultimately, what happened? In the 1946-47, a group of Muslims started hating Gandhi so much that somewhere in Bengal, when Gandhi was walking, they threw some thorn on his path, and Gandhi had to walk on that one, that path. So that was a group of Muslims hated so much Gandhi towards the end of freedom, 46-47. And then a group of Hindus hated Gandhi so much that they killed Gandhi. This entire story of Gandhi would force us to think that had Gandhi was not there, then what could have been the nature of freedom struggle, of course, it is a little hypothetical also, but the question was actually role of Mahatma Gandhi in the freedom struggle apart from current, that is Indian versus British, I say there was also undercurrent, and that undercurrent was between one set of Indians versus another set of Indians. Gandhi and Nehru, which is set in modern history, were the two Indians, one before and one after independence, who understood India's diversity much better than any other leaders of their generation. And that is why in history books they are highlighted, and the question would be again and again. This is what I'm telling you, how the answer should be framed, but this kind of answer cannot be given just by reading one book, just by reading one material. You have to listen. You have to listen from good interviews, you have to listen some good lectures, you have to read some good articles, which is very current and related to your syllabus, because the teachers who are framing the question, they are not going to ask only the knowledge-based question. They are going to ask the issue-based question. They are going to ask to know how your mind functions. And even in interview, you would find on-the-spot question, situation-based question. So the idea is that can you think on the spot? Can you think independently? This is the beauty of this entire preparation of IAS exam, prelims, main, or interview. So I often say to all my students that when you are preparing in this 12 to 24 months or 18 to 22 months, do not worry about the result of this exam, right? Enjoy the journey. The journey itself is going to be very beautiful, because in the next 18 to 22 months, you are going to study history and culture, geography of India and world, polity of India and world, constitution of India and world, governance, what is happening in terms of, policy, in terms of programs and various schemes of union government and state governments. You're going to study foreign relations and foreign policy of India. You're going to study Indian economy. You're going to study science and technology in India. You're going to study some of the ethics and ethical dilemma which we often face in administration, etc. So obviously, after studying all these in 18 months, no matter what you do in your life, you are going to be a very mature person, a very sincere citizen of India, and you would contribute maybe as a doctor and as an engineer or as a chartered accountant or as a lawyer, as a teacher, as a journalist or a businessman, whatever you do, but you would be much, much better than your batchmates of school and colleges once you prepare civil services seriously. And at least I would suggest target to reach to interview level, no matter your name is in the final list or not. Of course, I wish and I pray for your success, but I know the reality also, so one has to be ready. But a person who has reached up to the interview level and then he or she is doing anything in this world, they would be a sure success person in their careers and would emerge as a very good human being, because they would be not only very knowledgeable, but also very much sympathetic and empathetic about the issues like women, like tribals, like Dalit, like minorities. And believe me, you would start loving your neighbors, right? Whether it is Chinese or Pakistani, Bhutanese or Nepalese or Sri Lankans. You would loving Americans and Europeans. You would not go into the rhetoric of many media men and some politicians of India, because ultimately, as a human being, what we need, peace, prosperity, development, only for me, only for you, or for whole mankind. I hope whatever we discussed in this brief lecture related to your preparation, objective, and what UPSC is looking is going to benefit you. And of course, we are going to meet again and again. So, wish you all the best. Thank you very much.